everybody. This is Dennis Labriola, and we're here for another episode of Seventh Inning Stretch, the podcast. And this is where we talk about the importance of the relationships that we have, how they impacted our lives, and how we impact other people's lives. And today's guest is someone that I've known for 57 years, a long time, 57 years. And he is an expert in building and growing teams. He has 40 years, actually over 40 years, experience in the banking and the finance industry. And he spent 20 of those years with AAA. We all know AAA, right? So that's the American Automobile Association. And he served them as manager of club relations, and he was responsible for the local teams all across the United States, all across the USA. And we're going to be talking about teams today, teams, teamwork, and of course, and he was the manager. So every team has a manager too, right? So we were talking about that. He currently resides in the great state of Florida, and he's also was the co-subject of a story in my book, Seventh Inning Stretch. Chapter 2, all right, Chapter 2, and that Seventh Inning Stretch, Reflections on the Game of Life. And please, I want you to welcome my lifelong friend, Mr. Vic Pascucci.
Thank you, Dennis. Pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be anywhere, right? I mean,
at our age, yes. It's a pleasure to wake up in the morning.
Well, I'm so glad that you're here with us, and I'm excited about this particular episode. And as I think back on our relationship, and our relationship has been, very special. I mean, we've been through a lot of stuff together.
Yes.
A lot of stuff.
Heartbreak.
Yeah.
A lot of good stuff.
You were my best man. 1976, you were my best man, and you're still a pretty good guy.
Thank you. You were also my best man in 1976.
I know. We both were each other's best men. So we got two best men. Who's better than we are? Nobody.
And we both had brothers. So think of that one.
So listen, before we jump into this teamwork subject and team building discussion, I need to ask you, in the wiffle ball chapter of the book, all right, where we kind of talk about what it was like to play at your house, to play at my house when we were kids, was that pretty accurate in your memory?
Perfectly accurate. In fact, you brought up things that I forgot playing in my garage, where we had the netting inside the garage. So you had to hit line drives, and they had to be straight, because if you hit up, right, or left, it's in the garage. So that was a real challenge that I forgot all about.
Well, I'm glad
until I read that book.
I'm happy to remind you.
Yeah.
So now growing up, I mean, we've been on several baseball teams and softball teams together.
Yes.
All right. We also played against each other.
Yes, we did.
At times, as well. So let me ask you this: how important would you say that being on a team? How important is that in the development of an individual? And maybe you can talk about how perhaps that you were impacted with that.
Yeah. Well, I think team building is very important. I don't think people realize that actually starting at a very early age, especially after the last couple of decades where a lot of kids are in daycare. They don't even realize it, but they're starting to build relationships right away. And then they might migrate to maybe Little League Baseball, Pee Wee football, basketball, dance. But all these activities are really the foundation of building team and relationships. So you take those early years and then you try to put them into your older years, maybe in a more professional light. And a lot of that comes from those early years. And then you can still develop over time. For me, it was very interesting because I really didn't go into the relationship building field. It kind of happened for me naturally. And part of it was because of my personality and willingness to talk to people. And I actually enjoyed teaching and building relationships and building teams. So it was a very, very rewarding career for me. And I loved dealing with people. And for me, it was really interesting because I got to deal with people all over the country. And it was interesting because you had different aspects. As many you know, you have the Northeast, the Southeast, the Midwest, the West, and people think differently in all those locations. So you really had to put your effort into just trying to establish a relationship and the team building to their specific needs and goals. And you had to really take your own personal feelings out of it and try to build teams through their eyes and what they thought was important.
That's interesting, because what you're saying is that the growth of the team becomes more important than one's self agenda.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
interesting. Yeah, yeah. Now I know that that you've raised well, one of the other things too that comes to mind before I move on with that is that, most of the stuff that we do with teams and learning, maybe it's sports, maybe it's, a business team, whatever, but most of us kind of learn early on in some kind of a sports environment, or maybe it's a dance environment or something like that. But we also learn how to deal with the losing
Yes.
aspect of the team.
Yes.
And, I remember that there was one time, I guess we were kind of in high school already, and I got cut from the baseball team. A big mistake on their part, but
Big mistake.
but but the reality is that that was such a disappointment to me. I actually cried as a 16-year-old or whatever it was. I mean, because it was really something that I desired so much, and there was a great lesson that I had to learn through that. And my dad, helped me, and you helped me too, because I mean, we were good, we were best friends. We were best friends. Speak about that a little bit.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because I had a similar experience. You made the football team, and I got cut from the football team. And I didn't even get a chance because he looked at me and I was too small. So that really motivated me as a competitor to make the baseball team, which was, again, a sport that was good for me because of my size. But it really was a big motivator, having that, competition taken away from me and really driving me, because people can go either two ways. If you get cut from a team or you lose some interest or something happens like that, that can be negative. To turn it into a positive is very important. And I think it's definitely building. And it builds yourself up, gives you self-confidence, and realize that, okay, well, I didn't make it in this field, but I did something else.
Yeah,
that worked well.
And that can transfer over to like a business team that you may be on, because you may be part of a team, and and the leader of that team, or maybe the team overall, they kind of feel to go in one direction, you feel to go in another direction, and and sometimes you have to learn how to compromise in order to make the team better.
Yes.
And so many things. Now you've raised two boys.
Two boys.
Right. And and how many grandchildren?
Three grandchildren.
Three grandchildren. All right. And I know that one of the boys, Vic, is a lefty. He's a southpaw. Southpaw.
Yeah.
You notice we're here in front of some of my Yankee paraphernalia. Or a Yankee fan. I'm wearing this is my Baseball Hall of Fame shirt. Stand up. Tell him. Look, he's got number 7. Can you stand up? Okay.
I'm too tall.
There you go. There you go. Sit down. Don't hurt yourself. He's wearing number 7. He was always number 7.
I think I pulled a muscle.
Yeah. He was always number 7. I wanted to be number 7 too, because Mickey Mantle was one of the guys for me and for Vic, and but because he was a little shorter than I, they kind of went through issuing the uniforms by height. He always got number 7.
Yeah.
I settled for 17, so that was my number.
And I played center field a lot too.
You did,
besides pitching, but center field.
Yeah, center field pitching.
Yep.
Yeah, I know he actually was a better ball player than I. That's why he made the team, and I didn't make the team. But that's something I had to learn too. Anyway, let's get back to you have a grandchild. He has a grandchild who's a lefty, so he's all excited about teaching him how to play ball from being left-handed.
Left-handed. Because my two sons are right-handed, so it skipped a generation.
So with your two boys, all right, you raised two boys. They have families of their own now. They were involved with sports?
Yes.
Okay. Because a lot of young people that I see today, they really are more involved with solo activities than they are with team sports. And I mean, how many of us, it's like, put the video game away. I mean, as parents, that's kind of what we do. So what do you feel about that? And what do you feel the impact of that is on those people who do not develop the team skills as they go on later in life?
In fact, I think it really helped my son's personalities, because they got to play with a team. They got to understand the team environment. They also developed this competitive nature, and they started becoming competitive with each other on who was the better ball player. And I think just having those relationships, that they even today, when we talk about it, say, we miss those days. In fact, my grandson is starting T-ball this fall in Florida. So it shows you the impact it had on my son, that he thought it was a valuable opportunity for his son to be also on the team.
Yeah.
So I think, again, you're learning these activities as a young person that really will help you in later in life, especially in the business world. Now, one of the things I think that's a little bit more difficult today is a lot of people are working from home. It makes it more difficult to build a team. But if you still have the opportunity to do so, I think it's a wonderful opportunity. I liked being with people and being in a room with people. And in my days at AAA, I used to have to build teams throughout the country. So I would go into a location, for example, the Northeast, invite the Northeast clubs together, and we get together. And again, team building on what they all could do to benefit the program for their membership. And that was financial services.
Yeah.
AAA offers credit cards, mortgages, loans. So it was, again, a big help that I went through the team building experience from a young man or young boy to an adulthood, and it just kept developing.
Now you mentioned competition. A lot of people in the culture right now, I mean, like competition is almost like a dirty word, right?
Yes.
But I think that, a healthy competition, and I can understand sometimes competition, you can get unhealthy with that.
Yes.
But if you have healthy competition, I mean, what it does is that it pushes you to do a little bit better than what maybe you've done before. And think
Yes.
about, being, creative, having different initiatives, having some invention, those kinds of things all comes from that spirit of competition. Don't you
Yes,
agree?
I absolutely agree. In fact, even with the video games, a lot of the young men or young women that play video games do become very competitive. They want to achieve the goal. And again, it does help build that lust to do better, especially in your professional life, because if you develop it during your youth, you're going to have it in your professional life. And if you don't have that drive, well, then you're just going to be sitting around just doing a job.
Yeah. And, and we hear so often, we hear that, that term about being a team player.
Yes.
Right. But how can you be a team player if you've never really been on a team?
Yes.
I mean, how do you learn that? I mean, right? I mean,
it's very difficult. It's more of a challenge today than ever before.
So speak a little bit about your responsibility, the primary responsibility you had when you were with AAA.
Okay. So for AAA, I was at the national office. The clubs had their own president on board of directors, so they were independent. The AAA national office owned the logo, so that was the power. And what the AAA clubs had to do is that every 3 years, they had to go through an audit to make sure they're following all the AAA guidelines. One of the things they did not have to do was financial services. It was an election. So part of my role was to convince the clubs to participate. And when they did participate, I was there for them to develop marketing plans. Again, team building, marketing plans, customer service, go to their branches. So I was involved in the senior management level all the way down to the branch level. And again, the whole idea was to get them comfortable with the product and the programs, and then to develop locally what they needed to do. And again, as I mentioned before, it was across the country. So there's a little different variances from each section of the country that I had to be very familiar with in order to be successful in this team building and relationship building. AAA was very strong on relationships. They did not want to do business with someone they didn't know. So it was, again, a challenge to be able to build a relationship and then develop teams.
Wow. That's really interesting. And again, you mentioned it, that the success of that local office, that local team, depended on how well they operated as a team. And
yes,
and your success was how well you helped them succeed.
Yes.
So so that's why, so when you told me that your formal title was
club relations
manager or manager of club relations, I mean, isn't that what the manager does? Now both Vic and I are both New York Yankee fans. I know, and we're going through a really, really tough time right now. And a lot of the blame is being, whether it's true or not is another question, but a lot of the blame is being put on the manager to get his team to play on a high level, a successful level. So you needed to make sure that the teams were playing at the capacity that they were expected to play.
Yes.
Interesting. Wow.
In fact, another thing that I could suggest and recommend is a lot of corporations have teams that you can join, softball teams, bowling leagues, golf leagues,
No, true.
which is, I always strongly recommend you join them. Some of that really helped me golf. A lot of stuff I did was on the golf course because again, it was relationship building and doing some activity. And it really was very helpful. And a lot of teams that I played on, especially the banks and softball, there was a lot of high level people on that team. And you got to know people that you necessarily would have never known. And it certainly helped me for promotions because now they knew me. If I was applying for another position, some of these people already knew me from softball.
And they knew the value that you had as being a team builder.
Yes.
And everyone at the higher levels and the executives and what have you, that were always looking for that person's going to help build the team. So absolutely true. So let me ask you this. In your experience, what were some of the behavioral patterns that a healthy team would have?
The first was a positive attitude. Especially for the club people, financial services was foreign to them. This was not something they were comfortable with. So it took a lot of effort to make them more comfortable. So there was a lot of training involved, a lot of hands-on training. So it wasn't so much, we did do some virtual training, but most of it was hands-on. So literally I would go to the office, they would invite their managers and the club people, we get into a big room together and really discuss the product and try to make them feel very comfortable with it. That was really the first, and then the support. So they had my phone number, and anytime they got stuck, if they had a member in front of them and they couldn't answer the question, they felt comfortable to call me and ask me. And we also did quick sheets, gave them, the old Q&A so they could answer some of the basic questions. But that was the fundamental start, was training.
Right, and giving them the tools that they needed in order for them to do the job properly.
Yes, succeed. It's very important.
If you think about, I always, I'm kind of baseball, right? So I think about, what would it be like if, the team showed up, but the guy that had all the bats and balls and the bases didn't show up? I mean, that would be really hard to play that game that day.
Yeah, that would be a big disappointment.
And when I think about an unhealthy team, I think of the fact that it's, the focus of the team kind of fades and the individual kind of rises up, and then you start to have this egocentric type situation. You start to see gossiping going on, you start to see some backbiting, because now we're in this unhealthy competition type thing where I got to get ahead by putting you down rather than let's all rise together. And have you ever experienced some of that out in the field?
That is an excellent point. And one of the things I always did is even with my team that I had, I never criticized anyone if they made a mistake. I always taught them, learn from your mistake and move forward. So we never had that negative conversation. It was always positive. Okay, this was a mistake you made. Now the goal was not to do it again. And if you find yourself that you were in a situation where you might be making a mistake, stop, ask questions, get someone to help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. But it's very important not to get down on people if they made a mistake. In fact, if they don't make a mistake, they're not pushing themselves.
Yeah, learning.
Yes, now they're just sitting back and waiting for it to happen versus saying, okay, let's go this way. Okay, maybe I went the wrong direction with this, but what should I have done going forward?
Yeah.
So I found that to be very important, not to be negative on people making mistakes. In fact, encourage people, because if they don't make mistakes, they're never going to learn anything.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, so you went around to these different groups all around the country. I'm sure that each of those groups had a team leader there. And, so when I think of team leaders, I would always evaluate what kind of leader that is. I mean, is everything that happens about the leader? Is it about the team? Does that leader always look for credit, or do they look to deflect the credit to the team members? Do they take responsibility for maybe the bad stuff that may happen from time to time, or are they looking to basically, issue blame to somebody else? I mean, this is all, and sometimes, as we do this podcast, the whole idea of the podcast is to kind of talk about some of those things. Maybe you take a point or two away, and you can apply it, and I don't know, maybe make your team better. I mean, that's kind of what it really all is. So let's talk about the benefits of the healthy team. I mean, it's not just about operating or having behavioral patterns that are healthy, but the team itself. I mean, what identifies for you as the manager when you went into a particular location? How did you know that this was a healthy team? compared to one that perhaps was not a healthy team?
Very interesting. In fact, some of it was very simple because you could sometimes tell by body language and attitude. If they didn't have an interest during the training session, if they were doodling or looking in the other way, you knew there was an issue there. So I would try to address it right away and try to bring it to the attention. And then usually after the session was over, I would bring it to the attention of that manager saying, you know, I noticed this person, that person didn't seem to have any interest. Should we do some one-on-ones? Or maybe we shouldn't even have them on the team. Maybe you need to, you know, put somebody else there. So it was very important to try and identify the people that just didn't have the interest.
Wow, interesting. You know, when I think about teams, you know, one of the things that comes to my mind is, you know, the Navy SEALs.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about ultimate teamwork, and you know, I mean, each member on a Navy SEAL, each member has specific duties. They have specific responsibilities, and the other team members, well, they put their lives in the hands of that person, knowing that that person is going to perform their duties and their responsibilities at an expert level. I mean, talk about the ultimate of team play. I mean, they literally put their lives, you know, on the line, and they in the hands of somebody else. So this could happen also in business, or professionally. But you know, it may not be, you know, literally our lives. I mean, you know, it may not be that, but you know, but how does that level of, you know, the SEAL team, Navy SEAL team, how does that level of dependency on each other? I mean, that to me, that's the ultimate in team leadership.
Yeah, and that is the ultimate. And a lot of it has to do with people being comfortable with what they're trying to do and having some people that, quote unquote, might be the experts at their individual club, someone they can turn to. So what I did is I had a couple of people usually at each club that attended separate sessions with me to get them to be more financial services experts for their club. And then they still could rely on me if there was issues coming up. But it was very important because if you made a mistake in financial services, that could really be detrimental to that member. I mean, information getting out, you know, it's all about, you know, identity theft or, you know, credit card thievery, and if that's such a word. But yeah, it's very important that information is shared to the right people and that they make sure there's confidentiality when it comes to sharing data.
So here's a question that, you know, is maybe a little bit harder to answer, but what about in home life? Does does teamwork, teamship, I don't know if that's even a word, does it still matter?
I think a family team is very important because it helps build relationships not only with you and your children and your spouse, but also vice versa, so that they get to know you more and you don't have this, you know, antagonistic approach to being part of a family. So teamwork and families are very important, you know, especially chores. You think about growing up, even us, and we had chores to do from our parents. So you're learning how to do different activities. And a lot of it, you know, I remember griping about doing it myself, and my sons griped about doing it themselves. But now in their older years, and now that they have their own homes, they appreciate the things that they learned when they really didn't want to do it as teenagers. So it is a very important aspect of team building is within the family itself.
Yeah, and I think it's great for the self-esteem of the individual as well, because I know when I was growing up, you know, mom and dad, they were, you know, they did okay, you know, financially, you know, and but yet, you know, we didn't have that much extra. And I think that's, you know, kind of the blue collar worker story of America, right? So when I was like, I don't know, 12, 13, and I had my paper route, you know, mom and dad expected me to contribute a little bit to the finances of the house. And I don't see that as much anymore. Now I find that, you know, we're always doing everything for the kids, right? You know, we're doing, you know, and every so often I find someone that, you know, is kind of like, I call it old school when, you know, when it comes to that. But I think it's vitally important. And the reason why I think it's important is because it helps to build self-esteem in an individual, because I'm making an impact. I am making a contribution to my family. All right. And, you know, and the same thing, like you mentioned, chores. I mean, you know, as much as we griped about doing them,
Yes.
you know, when dad or mom, you know, showed us trust and giving us a responsibility, Well, as much as I may have griped about it, I always wanted to make sure I did as good a job as I could, right? And
Yeah. We didn't think of it as responsibility or building our responsibilities. We thought it was just as, oh, I have to do this
I got to
chore.
do this chore, right? That's so true. But yet it builds this sense of team play, character, right? It goes right into the fabric of that individual,
Yes.
and it's the individual, each individual, that impacts other individuals and whatever groups that they may be involved with. And it could be a sports team, could be a business team, maybe it's a team at church or within your community. I mean, heck, it really affects the entire world.
Yes.
And the time, and the world needs more help than than we care. So listen, so we say that teamwork, I'm going to put my hat on, teamwork makes the dream work. We're still on the same team. So listen, as we close, first of all, I want to thank you for being with me today.
My pleasure.
We had a lot of fun. As I said, Vic lives in Florida. He's come up and spending a few days with me. I took the advantage of really doing this, and I want to thank you for doing the podcast. But more important, I want to thank you for being a great life teammate, and really special to me. So listen, I hope that if you found something of value in spending a little bit of time watching this podcast, if you found that one thing, just that one thing, as a takeaway, well, maybe that can change some aspect of your life or someone else's life that is in your world. And isn't that what it's all about? So if you enjoyed the podcast, please share it with someone else. All right. To find other episodes, well, in my weekly blog, you can just go to my website. It's DennisLabriola.com. Pretty simple. DennisLabriola, all one word. All right. .com. Click on the button for my YouTube channel, and you can find everything there that you want. So until next time.
Let me cut him off.
Uh-oh.
One last thing. Team building and relationship building can be very rewarding.
Absolutely. It's got to be rewarding if it's done right. All right. If it's not done right, it's going to be painful. Oh, wow. So listen, I want to leave you with 3 words. All right. Remember, acknowledge, and appreciate all those around you. All right. Think about it. We'll see you next time.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.